Hi, I'm Chaplain Eric Doolittle. Welcome to Faith and Conversations about Life. Today we're going to talk about faith and Judaism with Dr. Ann Dolinko. Dr. Dolinko is part of the Shimer Great Books faculty here at North Central College. She studies a wide range of the humanities and social sciences, and her research includes social and political philosophy, post-culturalism philosophy, feminist philosophy, gender studies, philosophy of race, queer theory, and critical race theory. Lots of spaces and places that people don't often connect with religion, and hopefully one of our conversations can come back to that one day. As we get started, I want to remind folks that while we are exploring your faith identity today, you aren't claiming to be an authority on anything except your experiences. No one person can speak for the religious, faith, cultural, or ethnic backgrounds for a whole group of people. So while some of us are trained and ordained and might try to go a little beyond our bounds to give a bigger aspect and a broader understanding, today we're exploring one person's identity, one person's story to give a glimpse of what that's like here. So let's welcome Dr. Ann Dolinko.
Thanks, Eric.
You're very welcome. Thanks for being here today. We want to get started with you. So let's talk a little bit about who you are and your family story and background. Could you share some of that for us?
Sure. Well, I would say the first thing I think of myself is as a philosopher. So I think that's important in terms of where I'm comfortable talking about how one philosopher who studies a lot of political theory sees her faith relating to her academic work. But then I'm also a Jew. And I'm second generation in the United States. All my grandparents were born in the Ukraine and Russia. And if you ever saw Fiddler on the Roof, I mean, that was their life, like living in the shtetls. And there's pogroms, and my grandfather's 5 sisters starved to death. And so that's where they immigrated to the United States in about 1920. All of them, one's from Kiev, one's from a place called Pinsk. My husband's parents are also all from the same area.
Oh, wow.
So, so I'm only second generation. My parents grew, until they went to public school, they only spoke Yiddish, which is a language that's spoken by Jewish people, which is kind of a combination of Russian and German and Hebrew. So my parents only spoke Yiddish till they went to school. I speak a little Yiddish, but it's interesting how quickly assimilation happens.
It does,
yeah. And I was raised as a secular Jew. My parents were raised Orthodox, meaning they adhered to all the practices of Judaism, kashrut laws, keeping the Sabbath. What secular Judaism is I learned all about the culture, what it means to be a Jew, which is a complicated question, which we can discuss, but there wasn't religion involved. No talk of God. We didn't go to synagogue, and I didn't start going to synagogue till I was an adult.
So when your parents came over, did they just quit practicing, or was that something that they had done before immigration with all of the challenges they were facing with in that space?
Yeah, well, so my grandparents were all Orthodox, all 4 of them, and they came, four grandparents? Yeah.
Usually, yeah.
I'm trying to remember, I'm not good at math. I'm like, wait, yeah, there's 4 of them. And then so my parents, when they were younger, were raised Orthodox. Okay. So, but then, as they got older, I think this is also very common with assimilation, right? They wanted to be Americans.
Right.
And they sort of moved into the secular spaces of their lives, and Judaism didn't quite fit with it. And I think also at that point, there wasn't a lot of rich options for practicing your faith as a Jew, as kind of being Orthodox, which can be somewhat constricting for some people. And there was reform, but I don't know, they were not interested. My parents were both very involved in the peace movement, I don't know how to say it. I mean, they were hippies who were very much cared about the well-being of the world. My father was a psychologist and my mother was a teacher, and religion didn't fit in that. But being Jewish, we had Shabbat, the Jewish Sabbath. Every Friday we had a Shabbat dinner. We always had a Seder. So we did these things, but there wasn't the religious aspect. So, which I always wanted. I asked them if we could go to synagogue, but they said no.
But eventually you decided that you did want part of that in your life, and so you started engaging more intentionally on that.
Very much.
And you said that was later in your life?
Yeah, I started, it wasn't until I joined a synagogue when we had our daughter, when that's when we first joined. And first we went to a bunch of synagogues to see what would be interesting, because there's a lot of different types of synagogues, and it's called synagogue shopping, and we did it, and we went to various synagogues and found this Jewish Reconstructionist congregation in Evanston, and then we joined. And I was still a little not sure about the whole thing. I wasn't familiar with a lot of the practices. I didn't know the prayers. I didn't know Hebrew. So I felt a little, I was very committed to, I would say, God, and I knew, I'd studied a lot of feminist Judaism, so I knew it from that angle. But in terms of just the daily, how do you do a Shabbat service, I didn't know. So then I enrolled in an adult B'nai Mitzvah class, meaning a bat mitzvah, or bar mitzvah, which you usually do when you're 13, and I did it when I was 40. So I learned Hebrew, and I learned the prayers, and I really learned more about Judaism.
Wow.
So, yeah.
It's really interesting to think of how you think of most journeys into faith, especially when that relates into philosophy and identity, right? So many people, they think that what will happen, right, the normal path is I was raised very religious, and then I went off and I got educated, and I recognized how flawed and how limiting that was, and I got interested in philosophy, and it fell away, and that's a very common narrative, especially as people want to critique higher education, is because they say, oh, it's just there to destroy your faith. And here you've turned that thing totally on its head, and it's not an uncommon story we see, especially with folks who are raised around a religious culture, right? But they say, well, what is this thing, and how does that relate to who I want to be? And then they start to see what it does offer.
Well, and I think that's the intellectual inquiry of just being a philosopher, a philosophically minded person, and I just wanted to know. It's and I kept thinking, and that was always in the back of my mind, is the Holocaust. I was like, well, if should be something like that, I could die because I'm a Jew, and I want to know what is the faith around that? What is the practice of Judaism? What are people willing to kill others for being? It was very profound for me, is that whole knowledge, knowing, I had relatives who died in the Holocaust, and my grandparents were, in pogroms, that there was something I wanted to get in touch with. Why were people carrying this faith with them for several thousand years, and, despite all the hardship? But my intellectual inquiry, I think, I don't see the dichotomy between intellect and spirituality at all. I never have. And so many of the philosophers, there's so much philosophy as proofs for the existence of God. That's right. That's just such
ultimate meaning. That's existential questions.
Well, that's the thing.
Right.
And my own, that part of philosophy was never interesting to me, really, proofs for the existence of God. But what is meaning? That's what motivated me to become a philosopher. What is truth? How do you live the good life? What is the meaning of life? And for me, that ultimately, it is the pursuit of truth, it's the pursuit of knowledge, it's working in community with others, but it's also having faith in something higher and believing that force is something that I always feel with me as I go through challenging certain aspects of, say, a political situation, like my work as a feminist, that I think are unjust. I feel like my faith has protected me in fighting for justice. And I think about that, like, I think it's Audre Lorde. I'm trying to remember where she talks about, I think she says, I can't remember exactly what her thing was, but this idea of just having something larger that takes you through life. Right. And I feel like it energizes the pursuit of truth. Mm-hmm. That's how I see it.
No, absolutely. And we see that in so many different faith traditions, right? And even non-faith belief structures, where it is something beyond ourselves, whatever we might call that gives us that sense of connection with, I think we talked about Buber.
Yeah,
right?
Buber, I love
the I thou, that I am me, absolutely, but I need to recognize that there's something within you that is special and holy, divine, whatever we might say about that, that gives us a special connection, not just to people, but to the world around us in total.
And you could see where that idea of I, thou fits with being a political philosopher, because what is one's responsibility, ethical responsibility to the world? What is my ethical responsibility to my students, to my colleagues? I think it's a way of intentionally being in community that brings in a spark of divinity that I think is often lacking in some of our intellectual pursuits. And I think it just sort of, to me, it takes what's wonderful about thought and just kind of just gives it a little bit more flame spark,
To borrow religious imagery, it breathes life into it.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to show. Yes, exactly. And I definitely think for myself, as I've done, because I've pursued things that are sometimes challenging philosophically or going against the grain, and having that sense of a Jewish community behind me, of my faith behind me, has definitely helped me pursue it, go through things in adversity that I might not have otherwise done.
Absolutely. And I know within Judaism, there's a term for that, right? Of like how we engage the world.
Tikkun olam?
Yeah, can you want to speak a little about?
Well, that's what Tikkun olam is that's our responsibility as Jews to heal the world, repair the earth. And I think that absolutely goes hand in hand with being an ethically engaged political philosopher who wants to pursue truth and heal the world. And also recognizing that it's not an individual pursuit, it's a communal effort, and it's something that many of us need to engage in from whatever perspective we're coming from. I think that's something too that, I got my doctorate at Loyola, so with a Jesuit college, have many Jesuit collegians that were my friends. So,
and for folks who don't know, that's an outreach of the Catholic.
Yeah, that's an outreach of Catholicism. Also had a Franciscan professor, but that seeing how different faith traditions engage in the world, to me, was very similar to seeing how different philosophers try to find truth. And realizing that what we need is to work together for wholeness, not to kind of stay apart and fight for supremacy.
Yeah. So what are those practices that you have found being Jewish? Like, what speaks to you? Like, what grounds you? Where do you find meaning in the rituals and traditions that are part of your life?
Yeah, for me, a big thing with Judaism is keeping the Sabbath. So if there's nothing else that's one of our biggest commandments, is we have to keep the Sabbath, which for us is on Friday. So it's also interesting being a Jew in either a secular but sort of a Christian world, where our Sundays are our day off, and holidays, like people say, we get the holidays off. Well, that's usually Christmas or Easter, but that's a quick aside, but like for us, Hanukkah, which is the holiday coming up, it's a very, very minor holiday.
Right.
It's nice, and I love lighting. We light candles, but even as recently as my parents' generation, that wasn't even a gift-giving holiday. It's just you know, it's nice it's not in the Bible. It's a pretty minor holiday, but anyway, what grounds me is the Sabbath, Shabbat. So on almost every Friday I go to synagogue. And the Fridays that we're not at synagogue, we have a Shabbat dinner at home where you have a loaf of bread called a challah, and we have challah and wine. I don't drink wine, so we have grape juice. Challah and grape juice, and just like being with family and saying, oh, when we bless the candles, and it's just that moment of blessing and it's peace. And it's just taking that moment on Friday night, every Friday night, and just peace. I mean, it's just like, you know, the exhale at the end of a long week, and knowing also, so that really grounds me, because also knowing what can be a very difficult time, knowing, wow, by next Shabbat, it probably isn't even going to be on my mind. And I think going regularly to celebrating Shabbat, I kind of see the progression of time, and I see how this worries ebb and flow, life goes on, things that you think were so devastating aren't, and you know, it's really, I just find that regular attendance, and I go with my family, which is really meaningful to me. So that's one grounding, very grounding practice, as you can see. And then I celebrate a lot. There's a lot of Jewish holidays that I celebrate. Do you want me to
go ahead,
name some of that?
Please
yeah.
do.
Okay.
Because I think that's one of the challenging pieces is there are those holidays that get lifted up out of traditions and get like adopted by the culture to say like,
Hanukkah.
oh, right, and Hanukkah, which get lifted up because it's like, well, you have a Christmas tree,
right.
You know, there's this easy symbol that people can say like, oh, we also do a menorah, which we've recognized that, you know, we just started having this time period on campus for the past 2 years now, and somebody asked me and they said, do we have a menorah on campus? And I said, no, we don't. And I think that's part of the...
Do we still not?
Huh?
Do we still not?
Not, we just, it was a question that somebody asked, and I said, we never had a chance to think about it, and it should have been on our radar screens.
Right.
So it's one of those easy ones, right? And I think that's the thing, because it already fits into, you know, this time of year and the holidays.
Right.
And so it's definitely something we're going to look at soon. But then people forget that like the major holidays in that calendar for you all is very different.
Oh, absolutely.
And sometimes get wiped over by other things.
Yeah.
So yes, please tell us. So one of the nice parallels I always think of is that the calendar of a year, right? So we have these weekly cycles that like we do this on this day, right? And then we build that into a calendar year.
Right.
So do you want to start at New Year?
Sure. Yeah, and that's something I really love. I mean, I know it from Judaism, and I don't know it much from Christianity or Catholicism, is the cyclicity of it all. And I love the cyclicity. I love that. And so our first, I guess well, even the New Year. Do you mean the secular New Year or the Jewish New Year? Okay, so our New Year starts on Rosh Hashanah, which is usually the Judaism is on a lunar calendar, so that's why our holidays are always sort of, they can be anywhere from, like, they vary from like 6 months, 6 weeks. So Rosh Hashanah is usually, it is in the fall, and which is also when school starts. So it's usually, so right around the time where it's our most holy time of year is when we're starting school. And that is where you celebrate the new year, and it's considered, it's our new year, and it's a time, it's both, it's not really, I mean, it's celebratory, but it's really more of a deeply reflective time. It's a time to start kind of, you do have sort of, there's a sense of a clean slate, but also really needing to come to terms with what you want to leave behind in the past year, what you want to take with you. And there's a 10-day period between our holiday Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the Jewish year, and it's the Day of Atonement. And it's the idea for Orthodox Jews, or Jews who really go very much by what the Torah says, it's the day that God inscribes you in the book of life, or doesn't. But for Jews like myself, there's definitely a sense of your mortality, of the mortality of those around you. But what I love about that, so the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are deeply reflective. And what I really think is important is if you want to be forgiven by gods, I think of it that way. Some people might think of it less anthropomorphic. If you want to go into the new year with a sort of a sense of renewal, you have to ask forgiveness from any person you may have hurt. It's not enough to tell God you're sorry or say it in your head. You actually have to do it. And I really like that, because I think the necessity of confronting within your community your things you might have either unintentionally hurt somebody or intentionally done something you know is wrong, and having to face up to that and not just secretly in your heart get forgiveness. I like that. I mean, it's tough. So so that's the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. While I'm doing all that, I'm usually teaching classes and going to faculty meetings. So it's a very stressful time, because it's really contemplative. We on a lot of time in synagogue. On Rosh Hashanah, you go to synagogue in the morning, and we also do something which I really like. It's called tashlich, and you have to go to a body of water, and you actually cast out your sins. So you throw, like, we used to throw bread in, but that's bad for the birds, so now we forget what we throw, rocks or bird seed, something like so. But you actually go to a body of water and you toss, and it's such a cathartic, it's such a cathartic feeling, because you're literally, I mean, you're there with your congregation and you're throwing things in and really thinking, okay, and it's freeing. It's like it's just this physical manifestation of casting off. Yeah. And then you have the 10 days to contemplate, also grade papers, prepare for classes. And Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, you're in synagogue for hours. And it's a lot of just really, you can't eat or drink. And it's a lot of, and you wear white, and it really is facing mortality, because Jews get buried only in white, in a cloth. You don't wear your clothes. So it's really facing your mortality. Which I think is a powerful thing to do once a year, because it makes you really think, what is the meaning of life? And there again, I'm a philosopher. What matters in life? What's the meaning of life? So facing mortality once a year and saying, what matters is a really profound experience. Right. And then after that, we go into, I can't remember, do you know Sukkot or Simchas Torah comes first? I think Sukkot.
I'm only familiar with Sukkot. So.
Okay, Sukkot. So our next holiday is kind of like the Jewish Thanksgiving. It's a harvest holiday, and I celebrate all of this. So then we go to synagogue again, but you build a little hut. Well, people build, you're actually supposed to build a hut that you can stay in for 7 days. And my family, we build a tiny little hut. So it's just like a representative hut. But our synagogue has a hut. And it's beautiful because it's a harvest. Right. And so think about it. You've atoned, you've faced your New Year, you've toned, you've faced meaning, mortality, and now you're harvesting. You're reaping in the goodness.
And the celebration of life.
Right, exactly. Right. The reaping in, the Thanksgiving, and so it's a harvest holiday. And it's actually a fairly important holiday that most people don't even know about. So we do Sukkot, and then is Simchas Torah, and that comes right around the same time, maybe a week or two later. I'm not great with the dates, but right around the same time. And that is Simchas, is celebrate Torah, is the Torah. And you actually celebrate the Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, which I think you all call the Old Testament. And in our synagogue, it's beautiful because the Torah is a scroll. It's written in a scroll on parchment. And in my synagogue, you unroll the entire scroll, and all the adults hold it in a circle, and the children get in the middle. And it's beautiful. It's a very powerful symbol of, we're the people of the book, and here's our book, and we're surrounded by it. And the Torah is a concept of, the idea is it contains truth. And again, Jewish philosopher so much of Judaism sees truth in the word, in the language.
Right.
And so there's, you know, and I'm not only am I a philosopher, but I teach in a great books program. So I mean, I feel like for my whole life I've been primed to respect the authority of the text.
Absolutely.
So,
and I want to make a pitch here for anybody who's interested. Our friends over here at Congregation Beth Shalom, which is here in Naperville.
Rabbi David Eber is the rabbi, and he's great.
New rabbi, and of course I know Bernie Newman, who does a lot of work in our interfaith spaces. Both of them do. They've been great. They regularly have people come over who want to learn more about Judaism, and will gladly show them the Torah scroll, where it lives in the Ark, and explain the imagery of it, and you know, the little pointers.
Right.
Really,
it's
will
called
let
a yod.
people, we'll really let people see like what's really going on.
Yeah, it's nice to see. Well, I think we're always so curious. Like, to me, this is my first time being in this particular chapel. Right. It's like, it always seems so, you know, there's different things just being in the space of another religion. Like when I've gone to a mosque, I mean, it's just, you know, it's interesting. It's a little like, you're like, ooh, what's okay to touch? What's okay to do?
And what is familiar and what is so different, right? Like, and I love that dialect. I'm totally going to tell a family story. My youngest child was taking world religions here in the high school, which I commend them for, because they recognize that it's part of diversity and identity and cultural fluency. And so they have to go out and visit, and they get to pick 2 places that they want to go. And we ended up going to, let my child pick, and I'm like, I'd love to tag along. And we ended up going to Beth Shalom, and then we went over to the Gurdwara, which is the Sikh community in Wheaton.
Oh, wow.
And they also have a high reverence for their text, and they put it in a space that is elevated. They actually consider, I'm not gonna try and pronounce it because I do a bad job, but they actually put it in an elevated position, and they treat it as a living entity, as a person, as the last guru. And so it has a space up front where it's held in regard, and people read from it, and they do a little interpretation of it, and then afterwards they all go have a meal, and I'm like oh, wait a minute, this seems really familiar.
Right.
And it's amazing how many of those very human pieces carry so much meaning in those different places.
Absolutely.
So that's just one of those little, I think that's what's beautiful in that, is we're all kind of exploring and things. And so I'm hoping, I know that I'm going to sit down in the spring with someone who we're going to talk as we get close to Easter. We're going to walk through the Christian calendar. Yeah. And so hopefully people will, at that sometime, if they're watching in the future, they'll get to go back and say, like, oh, wait, there's these parallels of these things. So I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. That was interesting.
I get so excited about this.
Yeah, no, me too. Well, and so in terms of the parallels, like then we finish Simchas Torah, then we have a little break, and then it's Hanukkah. But I think it's so much. It's like, what do we do? You know, Christmas, Hanukkah, bringing light.
We're all bringing lights.
We want light.
Diwali is right in that same time period.
Exactly. I mean, it's dark. It's it's kind of scary. It's getting dark. Our humanity. Where are we? Light.
Yep, Kwanzaa, like there's seriously all of them that were Northern Hemisphere,
bringing in light. So that's what Hanukkah is, sort of bringing in light, and it's celebrating the miracle of this oil that lasted for 8 days, and it was only supposed to last for 1, and so that was a miracle. And then after that is my favorite holiday, which it's Tu B'Shvat, which is not in the Bible, and you would ask me, is that, and it's in the Kabbalah.
Oh, okay.
So, which is a mystic text, and it's beautiful, and we have so Rosh Hashanah was the new year, just the new year of the earth, the new year of everything. Tu B'Shvat is the new year of the trees. So we celebrate the new year of the trees. I'll go faster. Should I go faster?
No. I just wanted to make sure we're paying attention.
So Tu B'Shvat, we celebrate the new year of the trees, and traditionally you plant trees. And then one of our other most important holiday besides Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is Passover, which we do at NCC, which is we have a Seder, and we sit down and we tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt when Jewish people were slaves in Egypt. And there's often a lot of contemporary, again, I'm a political philosopher, contemporary discussion, contemporary meaning not in 2000 BCE, but about slavery and what it means to get out of slavery and get into freedom. And there's a a sense within Judaism is nobody can really celebrate freedom until everybody in the world is free. So Seders have there's a lot of different ways to bring in different groups in a Seder, but really recognizing the need for freedom for everybody. And then I guess and then we have Purim. Oh, I skipped Purim. Purim comes before Passover. It's kind of I feel like Passover is Sukkot is the Jewish Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. Purim is the Jewish Halloween. It's kind of a crazy holiday.
It is.
It's really crazy, and you get dressed up in costumes. And Orthodox Jews, you're supposed to get so drunk that you can't tell the difference between, I think the word Mordechai and Haman is kind of it's fun, it's a little crazy.
And if people have ever recognized it, because it is a fun little celebration, and I know when I always see it is when I see the Hamantasha.
Oh yeah, the Hamantaschen. Oh yeah, so Jews, we have food forever. I've left out the food. We could have a whole talk just on every single holiday has its own food.
Right.
Oh, every single one. The Hamantaschen, and what it means is they're shaped like this, the guy Haman's hat.
Right.
And so Hamantaschen is Haman's hat, and they read from the book of Esther, and every time they say Haman, you have these things called groggers, and you make noise, and you say boo, and people are dressed up, and it's very Freilach, celebratory.
And it really, when I think of it, because it comes in that same usually spring-ish.
Oh, like Mardi Gras too?
It's Mardi Gras,
yeah.
right.
I didn't even think about that till you just said it.
Well, most people don't think of Mardi Gras as a religiously rooted holiday.
It's right before Lent. It's like celebrated. Yeah, absolutely.
Right there. Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, it's the celebration. Oh my gosh, I totally missed that. Totally, because it's the celebration before you're preparing for Passover.
Right.
And Passover, and that's the other thing I like with Judaism is, once it's Passover, so New Year, at Rosh Hashanah, you get to kind of start over. Mm-hmm. Passover, in case you messed up, which most of us do, you get to start over again, because now you have to get rid of all the breadcrumbs, which I didn't think too. We throw the breadcrumbs of our sin into the lake at Tashlich, and then Passover, you're supposed to clean all the breadcrumbs out of your house and clean out your stuff. Spring cleaning, start again. Mm-hmm. And that's when we eat matzah, which some people know of, like it's a dry cracker that, I didn't think about, and then it's interesting because Easter is sort of the end of Lent, from Passover to this holiday called Shavuot, which is when we celebrating when Moses received the Torah on Mount Sinai. Mm-hmm. We have a 40-day period called Counting the Omer. And so that's sort of for 40 days, you sort of prepare for the receiving of the Torah.
Mm-hmm. And that's 40 days after Passover?
Right. It's between Passover and Shavuot.
And so there is a holiday celebration in there within Christianity, and it's actually 50 days.
Oh, no way.
It's Pentecost, which is the celebration of the coming of the Holy Spirit.
Oh my God, so
it's the same. The calendars match up so close. I mean, it makes sense with the roots.
Right.
And just the spaces that the folks, even when there was the pulling apart, the folks were still right there.
Oh, and, so much connection.
It really is amazing to see how those parallels and to find that out. So we're almost done with the holidays.
Yeah, so
we almost to
really the only other one. Well, there's the only other one in the before Rosh Hashanah is something called Slichot, which is saying basically I'm sorry. It's right before Rosh Hashanah where you prepare for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. You kind of prepare to start like forgiving and making amends. Mm-hmm. So I think I covered them all.
Good.
I left out all the food, but that's a whole other discussion.
And hopefully people will come out to Passover and they'll get a little taste of it.
Come to Passover. We'll be doing a Seder, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We got to set the date this year because I think it's either finals week or last week of classes. No. Yeah,
okay.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And so hopefully people will get to see this.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's like really, really late. It's like the last week of classes.
Yeah, I think next year is the leap year for, I know it shifts. So with that, and I think this is a good final finishing question about that, because we're talking about some of this already, about some of the ways that it's easy to be Jewish, and you see, you feel more seen, like with the Seder dinner, and it's like, yes, but the challenge of like the beginning of the year when it's the real lift. What's it like being Jewish at North Central? And I know you're in Evanston for home,
right?
So you're not here in Naperville as much. But what's good? When is it a challenge? And what can we do better to make people recognize that even though it's not a huge group on campus, but how can we help you feel seen and feel like you belong here too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate the question. I mean, it's interesting because actually, when you first said about the menorah, and my first thought was, oh yeah, we should get a menorah. But then I sometimes have like mixed feelings about it because I'm like, I don't know that I want to elevate Hanukkah to Christmas, because Christmas is a really important holiday, and Hanukkah's kind of, it's important, it's nice, but it's not like we all need to be celebrating it. I think I don't know that there's much the school can do because of the calendar. I mean, I think the hardest part about being Jewish is that the holiest time of the year for me is the beginning of the semester, which as a faculty member is one of the most hectic times of the semester. So that's a challenge. I really appreciate that we do the Seder. So that is really meaningful.
So maybe it's more just awareness that people recognize and say, we see that this is a hard time. We know that this was going on. But that can also come with that tension of how much people want to bring their religious identity into the space.
Yeah, exactly.
And where that lives too. So that's,
I think one of the things I had actually talked to you, and I accept it now, but it's sometimes jarring to be at. We Jews, in terms of Jesus, we think he's a good person. We think he's, but not our God. So it's a little challenging.
It's not a claim of divinity.
He's not divine to us. In fact, we're still waiting for, you all got your Messiah. We're still waiting. We're still waiting on that. But it's hard, it's sometimes at the graduations and convocations and to hear, in the name of Jesus Christ. And it's always a moment, and I understand it, and it's a Methodist school, and you were very kind to explain that, and I really accept that. But it is a moment of just like every now and then you're like, oh, I'm other, which is, I don't necessarily think is bad, but it's just sort of a moment of, and I don't know how students feel. In general, I went to Loyola where, there was, because it's Catholic, there was crucifixes in every classroom. So I'm kind of used to all of that.
Right.
And
yeah, it's almost easier when it's more, when there's more identification.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
then it's like, oh wait, what are we doing here? And I know that's something that has been a conversation, especially the past 5 or 6 years, as folks are saying, like, what does this actually mean? And we're kind of recapturing that language, but also that we continue to have dialogue with folks to make sure like that identity has to be something that is still welcoming. Like that is core to who we want to be, is to say, yes, this is the roots of our college, but that's not the whole of our identity as a community.
You mean the roots, meaning Methodism?
Right, yeah, the Methodism piece of it. But part of Methodism is that broad sense of...
Well, I think these conversations may help with that.
Yeah.
I think that helps a lot. Like part of it's being a Methodist college doesn't mean only Methodists are allowed, and doesn't mean that they're the only... I feel very welcome. And it's not like in class, that's why I welcome this opportunity. Like sometimes my students, I've had whole classes where nobody had met a Jew or knew what Judaism was. And it's like, I like just ask about it. Like that's why I like you're just asking me rather than it's like, oh, she's Jewish, that's weird, what does it mean?
And presumptions and all this. Yeah, I love the fact that there was a moment, and it's something I need to follow back up on with the person who has this identity, but I got to do the intro, the welcome to the college that I get to do at the opening. And I said, it's really wonderful because I was in a space where I could literally say, in this place we have everyone from atheists to Zoroastrians, right?
Yeah.
Literally A to Z in the space. But we don't always know, because it may be one person.
Right.
Or
right,
it may be
right.
part of who they want to be, right? Because now we're seeing a lot more people who are like, well, I'm this and this.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's just this beautiful tapestry that comes out of that as we feel welcome and safe, we can make space for those deeper discussions and dialogues. And then we can say, well, how can we do this better? How can we do this more? And so as our Muslim population has grown on campus, our Hindu population is starting to grow more significantly. We have folks who are, there's a new student organization called the Witches Brew, and that is the Wicca folks. Yeah. And so that we're finding space and being able to say, like, yes, we want to hear these things because it goes back to that deep question.
Right, right.
And I think that's where we can bring it back to is for you, what is the core question that is bringing you into this? Like, if you were to boil it all down as a religious philosopher, why, for you, what does this really answer? What is it?
This meaning Judaism or life or
life, faith,
I mean, to
belief.
me, it's
the catchphrase for the conversation, right? Life, belief, and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think the core, what it comes down to is what is the meaning of life, what is truth, and how do you lead a good life? I mean, those are my. That to me, there's just no conflict between my religious life, my academic life, and I also think, like, with all these other groups, from Wicca to Zoroastrian to Catholicism, I think it's people trying to be in touch with something more and something that's going to elevate our ability to be the best people we can be. And I just think we come at it from different perspectives. And I think that adds a richness to it, that we're coming, because I don't know that my perspective is the only one. Like, it works for me, but I'm glad you're doing your thing. And somehow, as a community who's committed to finding what is the meaning of life, what is the good life and truth, I think we can make the world a better place.
And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's what I think it's all about. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Thanks for the ongoing conversations we've had. I know we'll continue. Yeah. Hopefully we'll get to share some more of them as we go along. And thank you for those of you who have watched. We really appreciate you dedicating your time today. If you have a moment and you're watching online, please leave a like. We really appreciate that. And tell folks that you are seeing these videos. Feel free to watch the rest of the series and keep an eye out for new ones in the future. And thank you, and have a blessed day.